Um, we will, with that, I will go ahead and turn, and if you can, please mute your calls so that we don't have any sound distractions. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Lynn Murphy-Rivera, who's our moderator. Lynn is a quorum member. She's one of our New York chapter co-chairs. She's the managing director for the Americas of AESC. And with that, I'm going to turn this over and thank you all for joining us.
I am thrilled. This is a pleasure. This is going to be such a wonderful discussion. So excited to have Nana, Adae, and we will try to keep this within the 1 hour, but if we go for 4 hours, I think most of you would stay anyway. So just kidding. So let's start off. Nana is a senior executive in financial services with JP Morgan, where she is active in diversity and inclusion initiatives. Nana has spent 7 years on active duty as a cryptologic officer after graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy. That always gives me chills, so I'm just going to acknowledge major chills. She served in Japan, as well as in the Balkan and Mediterranean theaters as a communications evaluator on board, here goes more chills, the EP-3 aircraft, earning the Naval Achievement Medal, the Navy Commendation Medal, and the Air Medal, okay? After leaving the Navy, Nana earned an MBA from a not too shabby school, Columbia Business School, one of the best. She chairs the board of the Mission Continues, sits on the finance committee of the U.S. Naval Academy Alumni Association and Foundation, and she serves on the board of the Rebuild Foundation. And Nana is a member of Quorum Initiative as well. I mean, maybe we could have started there, but Nana, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are thrilled, and I hope you are as thrilled as we are.
I thank you so much. I mean, I get so much when I come to these and I listen to amazing women. So I just feel like I'm in great company. And so I'm excited to actually be part of this conversation today. And I'm actually really excited to see Cindy Viadella, who I went to high school with.
Oh, how cool.
Also
hey, Cindy. So
I had to do it.
I love it. So we have a great community of women on the call. And as Diane mentioned, you know, to the extent you feel compelled, which you probably will, just put a question in the chat and we will do our best to address them as they come up. Let's get started. So Nana, tell us a little bit about your background. I know I did the intro, but there's always so much. There's a lot of magic in that intro and in the background of what you've done. Let's talk about your banking world and your time in financial services. How did your journey influence where you are today? We can go there.
Yeah, so as you've heard, I was a naval officer, and kind of part and parcel with our education is leading and managing organizations, right? However small or however big they are. And so I've always had a fascination with how organizations work, and always wanted to figure out like how I could run one, like let's just call it out, and how I could be, you know, just understand how they tick. And so when I left the military, I went to business school because I thought that would give me at least a sense of what was going on out in the real world. And when I came into finance, I actually ended up going down a route that was a bit more entrepreneurial, right? It was this idea that in wealth management, you could create a business by servicing a lot of people who, quite honestly, oftentimes had their own businesses, right? So there were a few different angles that I was trying to get into this sort of organizational structure and this kind of entrepreneurial thing in financial services. And so it was really interesting. I've done that for 15 plus years at a few different organizations, and thoroughly enjoyed it, and ended up going through management, running a desk, doing it in different offices at JP Morgan. So it's been a really fun ride. I would say recently, though, I actually pivoted about 18 months ago, and I'm now in the digital product development world, which is like totally different and doesn't seem at all linked to what I did before, except I'm still in the private bank and I'm building these digital tools for advisors. So I'm intimately familiar with what it is I am uplifting. And it is really like having my own business. I have product managers who work under me. I have UX designers, researchers. We have a couple development teams. And it's been really exciting to set the vision. We've had the good fortune to start from a from scratch project, right? It was just greenfield, open sky, like we know what we want to do, what should you do? And so it was vision, thinking through the strategy, making sure we had the right stakeholders on board, all of it. So
Wow.
It's been really fun.
That is just another wow for me. Let's go a little deeper. Thank you for that. We can kind of even go before you were the rock star, but you were always a budding rock star, right? So, I mean, you came here and your high school friend is nodding yes. So, how about being your family, and how your family has
Sure.
inspired you and, your beginnings there.
Sure.
And yeah, tell us a little bit
So
about that.
yeah, I'm a first generation kid. My family's from Ghana in West Africa, and I sort of liken it to if I had just moved to Hungary and basically spoke Hungarian, but somehow had to like figure out how to make myself and my kids successful. Like, how would I do that? And it's just very different, right? They just grew up in a totally different environment, came and just started from scratch. And my mom ended up being a account executive at Xerox. My dad was retired as a college professor. And so it was, I think, really a wild ride for them, but their support and their just work ethic and values that they taught my brother and I think were just kind of the start to always feeling like there was more to do, but they also were the type of parents that they like revel in the accomplishment. So it's never this idea that like it's not good enough, but there is always, like, my mother would be on this call right now if I had thought to ask her to come. She's just that kind of person. So
it's not too late. It's not too late.
Know, right? Yes. So yeah, no. So the family structure is great, and quite honestly, I think I probably grew up pushing myself a bit, realizing how difficult it was for my parents to just do something harder than I felt like I've been doing. I feel like I had a pretty cushy life. So maybe that drove me a little bit more too.
Wow. And, there was something that you said in reference to your parents starting from scratch. There's a theme there, particularly with your entrepreneurial focus and expertise. So let's go there. So how did you start this entrepreneurial endeavor that you have currently in addition to the day job that you have?
Yes. So diversitypop.
Yes.
So diversitypop is an application that basically is DEI on the fly. It is a really neat way to consume information in this space in the same way that you consume information any other way, right? Whether it's Instagram, Twitter, your news feeds. And it kind of came to me in that there are 11 West Point folks that were sort of milling around this idea and developed it. And they sort of joke that the pinnacle of inclusion was inviting one Naval Academy person to be part of the group. But they talked to me about this idea, and it was really timely because we ended up launching last fall. So, everything that had happened last year with the conversation in race, it really seemed like perfect timing. And I'll say that I've always been interested in entrepreneurial endeavors, but I'm sort of like this A to Z person, and I would get so paralyzed and like, oh, what about the legal entity and all the stuff that doesn't matter. You just got to kind of go and do it. And so for me, this was a really interesting entrepreneurial venture that was on the spectrum of something I hadn't really thought before. So it's basically this distributed leadership model where most of us actually are working our regular full-time jobs. And there are a couple of folks that are like sort of full-time heads down, making sure that the software is up and going and, doing the sales, but I'm still jumping on sales calls and kind of doing different things. from time to time to get the word out and spread it out. But it's actually at this stage for me right now, a super interesting opportunity to be entrepreneurial in a way that kind of fits my life right now. And I think I'd probably always thought that I kind of had to just quit, start from scratch, and do something totally different than my life could probably, mesh with. So it's been interesting, actually. It's been an interesting journey.
Sure. No, that's what's so exciting about the idea of diversity pop is it's kind of how it works. And I know we had talked about the app in multiple channels. Could you tell us a little more? Because I know I was really amazed with how it works.
Yeah. So basically you open up Diversity Pop and it wants to understand your mood a little bit, because it wants to understand the type of information that maybe it's going to want to prompt and show you. And so are you adventurous? Are you feeling a little bit apprehensive? It just wants to make sure it understands a little bit about you, because the beauty of Diversity Pop is this isn't diversity in a way where it's like, this is information that you should know. This isn't like definitional of like, okay, this is what a microaggression is. And it's not like a lot of the probably diversity training or information that we've gotten. It's the beauty of it is it's actually all about discovery. So once we lay the groundwork on like how you're feeling, then you can go into the application and there's like probably like a dozen channels, and it's things like gender, race, religion, orientation, those who've served, age, right? All of these different ways that we are diverse. And you're able to go into one of those links and you can start getting information. And so there's a number of different modes of being able to get the information, like a little mini TED Talk, right? Like a snippet from a TED Talk that's maybe just a couple of minutes or less, right? You could read a factoid. You could actually, you can see content that sometimes people have actually loaded into the tool. And then it actually does little quizzes. So then it's actually tracking, like, are you retaining some of this knowledge, like, as you're reading through it, and it gives you little scores and it kind of gamifies it. So you get the sense of how you're doing over time. And if an organization gave you access to this tool, you kind of see how you're doing in relation to the rest of the department or the rest of the organization. But if you just like download the app in the App Store, you're basically in this like sort of universal group of people who just downloaded it in the App Store. And the fun part is, I remember when I first got on the tool, there was a question that asked, what state has the most Native American reservations? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I've never thought of that question before, right? And so I'm looking and looking and I'm thinking and I guessed wrong, right? But what I found was, as I thought more about it and after I got the answer, it started me thinking, like, do I know Native American people? I was like, are there Native American people at work? It's like, how would I actually get more proximate with Native Americans? And it was this kind of kernel and this nugget of discovery that made me actually more curious and want to know. And I think that's really the magic of it, right? There's a lot around the diversity topic that all of us could Google, but we just don't. And there's something about the way that this kind of serves it up to you, that it allows you to do this discovery that kind of hooks you. Yeah. And I think that's to me is the magic.
That is so exciting. And I love the example. I think we had talked about that, in our prep, is sort of diversity training being, almost punitive, in so many other respects. And this application, Diversity Pop, gives you kind of the magic of discovery, of wanting to know more. There are so many things that we don't know about each other, and right. And I think,
if I could add one thing, so the answer is California.
That's right.
Because oftentimes I was telling somebody this and I never told them the answer, and after our conversation they're like, where is it? So the answer is California. And the other thing I'll say about the fact that it's non-punitive is, so I'm Christian, and I read a snippet that said, Christianity is based on, the precepts of Jesus Christ. And I was like, gosh, this is such this seems like kind of insulting. And then I was like, no, actually, you're wrong. That's your modality. You understand that. Other people may not understand that. There may be a snippet about Judaism, Islam, whatever Buddhism that you don't know. And that's like the 101 version. And so I love the fact that they're very simple concepts. There's more complex concepts, but it's sort of like catches you where you are and allows you to kind of go from there. So
Wow.
that's the other thing I'll
No,
say.
thank you for that. I mean, it sort of makes me inquire further in terms of, this sounds hopeful. This takes the cynic out of, maybe the cynicism. I was going to call myself a cynic, but it takes the cynicism out of diversity, equity, and inclusion training. If there was one thing that you could hope for, as a result of diversity pop, and it could just be the wildest aspiration, what would that be?
Shared empathy.
Yeah.
Just
Definitely.
just so that one person can look at another person and understand their humanity and be empathetic in that, because we all understand our own humanity. That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nana. So here's another question, and you and I talked about sort of the how your corporate experience. We've talked about the family and the structure that inspired you, and here you are now doing all of these amazing things. You've moved through the organization, through JP Morgan Chase, with different assignments that test your will and your abilities, and you keep performing. You just keep outpacing. What would you say in terms of your corporate experience? How has that influenced your entrepreneurial projects? If there's a tie there.
Yeah. So I never wanted to be in sales. My mom had been in sales, and I was like, sounds like the worst job ever. And she was like, well, the worst thing they could say is no. And I was like, precisely. Like, why would I want people saying no to me all day? Like, I'm a nice person. This sounds terrible. And then I proceed to go into sales. And not only did I not sell widgets, which I think I might have preferred, but I'm selling now like esoteric financial concepts to people, like trying to explain to them why they should want a short duration bond portfolio. Like, there's literally none of those words they understand except short. And so I do think, though, that discipline in the corporate world, at least that I learned around how to approach some of these conversations with people, is very helpful, especially in the early stages, I think, of entrepreneurial life, because you really do have to figure out how to get somebody to want something that they don't have right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when phones started coming with cameras, and as on principle, I was like, no, thank you. I have a camera. I mean, how crazy is that? Now I'm like, how weird that I ever had a phone with no camera, right? But they had to figure out how to explain to you that this was a good thing. And so to me, that is kind of understanding that person who's sitting on the other side of the table, and trying to be able to put myself in their shoes, and trying to be able to extract the value that I think they are going to get from it. And that, to me, is what sales has taught. And so it's been important for me, as I've worked in corporate, to make sure that I felt like I'm talking about things that I actually believe in, right? So that helps to come to something entrepreneurial that, like, you have to believe in your core. Otherwise, like, that's not going to work. So I would say definitely that sales mindset has definitely helped.
Sure. And as a longtime sales professional, I resonated with everything that you said there. And I think we were also talking about the whole idea of being able to conceptualize.
Yeah.
And and dream, I guess, and sort of get into the head of the people that you're trying to communicate with. What would you say in terms of having confidence, confidence in your in your ability to make those assertions as you reach out to individuals on your current team? Like, where would you, how do you find that? Like, how did that happen, that you've had that ability?
Yeah, so no, I think it's definitely developed, right? Like I definitely didn't show up day one being like, I know every answer and this is going to make sense to everyone and we're done. I think I'm probably a little skeptical in certain instances. And so I feel like I have to be able to sell myself. And so as I progressed in my career, when I would work with clients, like I would always think of it as a puzzle. Like how could I see around corners, right? Like we've heard that term. I wanted to think through the 4 or 5 questions that I thought they were going to ask me that were going to like kind of tank the whole thing. And really, when you think about those questions, they're really based in uncertainty, maybe some level of fear, right? And if it was something that actually had real value, like how is it that I could kind of go into that, the crux of the issue and address it up front? So it wasn't, it didn't feel like, oh, well, now that you've asked me about that, I'll explain that piece, right? Like I always wanted to sort of come up front with the good, the bad, and the ugly, but also make it really relevant as opposed to just like a list of pros and cons. Because people have to be able to sort of see and understand how it's applicable. Otherwise, it's not going to work for them. And so I know in the beginning I didn't do that, but I definitely think over time I've gotten more adept at that.
I think that, and I'm going to tie in a question that Diane had put in because again, we're on the theme of like, how did you just do that? You know, and how did you get there? And, you know, what are the motivators for you? And, you know, oftentimes adversity leads to, it's sort of an opportunity. A disappointment is an opportunity in disguise. So the fact that Lehman, let's just bring up the whole Lehman bankruptcy. I'd like to know how you turned that bankruptcy and the impact of that, which was adverse, into a positive outcome. Sort of how did that how did that affect you?
So yeah, so of course it was devastating. I don't know if anyone here worked at Lehman or Bear or knows anyone who did. So you know, I wouldn't. Yeah, okay, I see some nodding heads. So I don't have to tell you what it was like. But
Lehman was a great client of mine. So anyway.
So lots of reverberations, whether you were in it or you were connected to it in some way. Yeah. So it was really, really a challenging time. And but as Diane put in the chat, you know, I do call it the blessing and not so disguised because, and I think, you know, we say this among friends here, it's not like everything was perfect, right? There were definitely things in my career that I probably was accepting that I shouldn't have been accepting, that I should have been thinking through differently, and I should have been moving forward differently. I was learning a lot. But there were definitely a few things that I needed to like switch around. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure that I would have been able to generate at that point in my career and that point of my just personal development enough momentum to change my course myself.
Yeah. Yep.
I was sort of incrementally happy that things were getting a little bit better over time. And that was not really what was going to move the needle for me ultimately in my success. And so for me, even though it was a very, you know, traumatic and unfortunate event for so many people, it was like a blessing and not so disguised, because then it forced me to actually look at something different. And, you know, through networking, found out that there was a role that was, you know, similar to the role that I had, but quite honestly on steroids at JP Morgan. And that actually forced me to learn way more, forced me to have a structure and a framework that benefits me today that I wouldn't have had before. So I would say that the difference of sort of the before and after has also given me confidence now when I think about how do I generate my own momentum to make a change, to turn course, because I know what it felt like sort of like before that, and knowing that I was sort of waiting for incremental changes that were exogenous, and I needed to really now think on this side of my career, how was I going to make those changes myself? And I think you can't know that until you go through some of those types of those inflection points, quite honestly.
Exactly. Would you say that resilience was a factor for you?
Yeah, you know, there really is no other option. Maybe that's something I learned from my parents. Like there really was no other option. Like I needed to figure out how to move forward. And so it's going to look different for everybody. People will get super creative. They'll like put up their own shingle. They'll realize that they've got skills that they never put together in a basket and, you know, remarket themselves. Like everybody's going to figure out that way to be resilient. And in the moment, you may not call it that, you may just call it survival, but every little piece of it like adds up together. And then I think if you can be truly reflective on it, you can actually like give yourself credit for that and then use that for the blueprint going forward when you're not in crisis, right?
Sure. I mean, I also take note from, you know, our conversations that one of the things you uncovered about yourself and, as you were reflecting is that you like creating order out of chaos. You know, tell us a little bit about that. Sort of, what does that look like to you, and how do you know you're so good at this? I can imagine, but please share with us.
Yeah, I am an order out of chaos person. It's not like things aren't messy. Like if you were to see outside of this computer, things are a little bit disorganized. But I do have an eye and a desire for what I view things as being more streamlined and less noisy. And so sometimes that's like even just like physical design, right? Just even my aesthetic, which comes through quite honestly in this digital tool that I've built. Even the design team is just like the aesthetic. Everything's very clean and consistent. And I'm like, yeah, because I would not be able to sleep at night if it wasn't. But I think it also helps to like, for me, if there are loose ends, if there are things that are just kind of like on the periphery that just don't have a home, for me, I've got to figure out how to make that order out of chaos. And so in the sales, in the sales realm, of course, it's like the unknown is like the client and their reaction. And I think that's why I would go to that sort of like, how do I look around the corner? How do I create the puzzle pieces? How do I have answers for like the 4 things that I think might happen? Because that's my way of creating kind of order out of chaos.
Yes.
And in this new role, I think that you could almost look at this open field a little like chaos, but for me, it was actually really nice to say like, it's a blank sheet of paper. Like, how would I build this very orderly building if I could build it? Right. And I know that I'll have projects in the future where the building will be sort of all out of whack and I'm now going to have to redesign it. And so for me, it's just kind of like that one piece at a time. How do I move forward? How do I decide what's most important? And I think this role has definitely given me more confidence in that, because the sales cycle is a sales cycle. But when it's truly like something that in a year, someone's like, okay, does it work? Did you deliver? Like, is this what we asked for? It's definitely built my confidence in like how I'm thinking about things and knowing that actually works. Wow. It's a bit of a proof statement, which has been nice.
Love that. I mentioned, let's see, we're getting a question. It sounds like Diversity Pop is available to both the individual, the company / organization. Can you explain how the individual use of Diversity Pop or application of it is different versus companies? Like, what is the?
Sure.
Yeah. Give us
sure. So if you just download it on your phone, then it's literally just like something that you have on your phone that you can go to at any time. I forget the stats, but it's something like people probably spending 4 minutes at a time on their phone, and just being able to get those little snippets of information. You can actually share content. Like if you wanted to like say, oh, I saw this really cool video, and you want to share that with it. So you can create a bit of a network and an environment, even for people who don't have the app, because it's all just content that's shareable. If you're in an organization, it really adds a complementary layer to what organizations are already doing, or it could be kind of the base of what a company is hoping to do. And so you can see like, so I know someone who has a startup that maybe has like 100 people in it, and they're now starting to think like, oh, like we actually have to build this out. We don't know what it looks like, and we're actually pretty homogenous. So the idea of making like employee resource groups for like the 4 Black people, like that doesn't seem like the right answer at this point, because we're not like big enough and we don't really know what we're doing, right? And so talking to them, it's like, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about how you might be able to use something like diversity pop. And so you basically buy licenses and it becomes like this employee benefit, like you allow them to use it. And then the content in itself, you can actually push out notifications, you can push out quizzes, right? Like you can get a sense of like, you can have a battery of questions that are like trying to measure your command climate or your company climate. It's a military command climate, but sorry, company climate, do people know what your values are? Or you can just push out that kind of information so that it's like top of mind. You could take any one of the snippets of information and maybe that becomes like a lunch and learn topic, right? Like we were talking to the head of HR, and I loved it because hi, Nicole. I loved it because on his way to his meeting with us, he was recounting how he had just watched like a little pop talk on the 2 types of acceptable isms left. And according to this pop talk, they were anti-Semitism and ageism.
There you go.
And he was so enthralled with this concept, and he was like listening. It was just a little snippet, and he was on his way to go talk to the COO or somebody else. And it prompted conversation. And he was like, you know what I just, and and he was so excited when he came to the meeting with us because he was so jazzed. It was kind of like my Native American thing where it just all of a sudden, it just made you think like, huh. And so imagine being able to take something that is a tenet or a value or something in the organization that you want to talk about. And that's just that little piece. And then saying like, great, let's just create like expanded content around this. And like, let's start having relevant conversations with our organization that's like pushing out the values that we think are important in a way that doesn't feel like curriculum, right? Like it's actually really timely and it kind of gets people involved. You can push out, like if there's a exhibit at a museum that has something to do with a diverse artist or subject matter, and maybe the company partners with them. That's the type of thing that you can like push out content, and you can even ask your employees to like, hey, like send a video while you're at the exhibit, tell us what you think. And you have the ability as the administrator to be like, okay, that content's not appropriate, we're not uploading it. But it is a way to make it like interactive and livable, right? And it's truly a part of your life, which is what, if we are going to get ourselves to this sort of like mass empathetic, like mass humanization vision, it has to feel lived, right? Like it can't be 2 sessions a year with a trainer. It has to be, this is actually how I operate. So when I walk into this store, this view goes with me, right?
Yes. We're getting some really, a lot of excitement around diversity pop, which, of course, someone, I think it's Andrea, wanted to know, could we give examples about how it can address gender issues in the workplace?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of content on the gender site, right? And so there's going to be all different angles of like little snippets that could probably go in multiple different directions. But we do try to talk about how is it that we can actually measure change, right? And so are we able then afterwards maybe to have questions and tests, because it takes a while for data to follow, right? Just because you get diversity pop, it doesn't mean 3 months later, like you're going to have a totally diverse workplace, all your hiring practices are going to change, all of that kind of stuff. But can we actually like say, hey, is there a way to push out content that asks questions of, in your decision making, I'm just trying to make something up here, but like in your normal course of decision making, did you include extra people? Did you include different people in that conversation this time? Right? There may be something about creating a level of inclusivity in the environment that you could actually start to like suggest and then start measuring, right? And so I think you could do something similar with women. Like there could be the opportunity to connect people on sort of like little mini mentorship that have to do with different topics, right? You could like assign different topics to like maybe a couple of people, a pair that includes a woman, and like have people actually have like real conversations about those issues and see kind of like what comes out of it, right? I think there's probably a few different ways that we can think about it, but I love the question because it starts to make me think about the puzzle piece of like, how can we actually like lay out a few examples for people on something super, super specific, like gender issues.
Certainly.
And
I mean,
and I think it's also important to make sure you understand what those issues are for the organization. Hopefully that is part of what something like this can do, is personalize it so that it doesn't feel like you're just, someone's like just spewing like, this is how you should treat women, like you should have mentors, like, but it should be something that reflects the filling of a gap that's in the organization. But I love the question. Thank you.
Wonderful. I have a follow-up on that. Well, there are probably two. And we have two additional questions. See, we're going to run out of time, which is great. It's exciting. So, a lot has been in the past few days, in the news about the impact of racial violence and hate, particularly against Asian American and Pacific Islanders. And, when I think about diversity pop, I think how much of a benefit it could be just from an awareness standpoint. What are your thoughts on how could we use this, to get into the minds of, let's start with Atlanta, and the police force that is basically not really seeing what this, the potential of these issues.
No, it's a great question. And we actually do have, as a client, a police force in Canada, believe it or not. And the police chief is like super excited about this. He almost likened it to like Peloton. Like if we just bought a Peloton and everyone got to ride it at work, right? He loves that it's actually not on a company issued device, but that it's actually on their phone so that they can live it. And so I do think that there is opportunity, especially in those environments where it might be easy for some of that humanity to not always be present, because it's a very different, it's like, I remember my brother worked in customer service and at a healthcare company. And after a while, he was like, it was actually really hard to be sympathetic because I heard so many complaints like every single day. And he's like the gentlest, most awesome person, but you just recognize that there are situations where sometimes these things happen. And unfortunately, in law enforcement, that can't be where that happens, right? And so it's actually been really, really interesting and hopeful, and it was wonderful to see that there was this police force. And I actually think we just signed on another one in the US, but to see that level of understanding needs to happen in lots of different types of organizations, and I think could be truly instructive. In the aftermath of something like that.
Amazing. We're going to have a side conversation about that.
Yeah.
I'll explain later. So there are more questions here, and I think you're inspiring those of us on the phone of how to just do the things that that are important to you, particularly spending time on your entrepreneurial endeavors in addition to everything else. Sort of how do you integrate your passion, side gig, day job,
for sure,
eating dinner, working out.
No, it's I will tell you, I have this great friend who every week the three of us actually get together and we do something called Planner Life. So like we're absolute dorks. We bought the same planner. I can't tell you that this has always been my life. So don't like be even impressed about it. But we all got the same planner because there's like a method to the madness. The one crazy girl started it. And we actually plan out the week. And we do things like, there's like a habit tracker in it. So, I try to make sure that like working out is in there. I don't always hit the mark, taking my vitamins, like it could be anything, get outside, whatever. But I do try to plan out the week, and it makes a huge difference. It literally makes, I can't believe I waited this long to try to like organize things like this. I would always just come into work on Monday and be like, okay, let's start. And like, I can't do that anymore. So that's actually partly how I do it. And so what I do is, sometimes I actually give the diversity pop folks like just some times when I know I'll be available. But I always tell them, like, if you need something, or if there's a call you think I could be helpful on, or if it was a contact of mine, please let me know so that I can try to, like, change up my schedule. Like, we're all very busy, but I think if this past year and working from home, or whatever flexible situation has outcome from all of this, I think I've at least learned that I probably have a lot more agency, at least a bit more agency over my time than I thought I did. And I could actually say things like, oh yeah, I'm not available. And like, then I'm not available, right? Like,
Yes.
before I would just be like, oh yeah, and then they would just be like, let's just do this anyway, and I wouldn't say no because I'm like, well, I'm just sitting here, and now I'm just going to be like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So I think that helps me. I probably got a little confidence from that.
Yes.
And then I do have to just do some extra because this is like a real thing. So I'm definitely probably spending some time on the weekends, or like after I hang up with regular work, and talking through some issues and trying to understand what's going on, and seeing where I can be helpful. So it's probably not any more difficult, quite honestly, than adding another thing to the regimen that you already have, which is challenging in its own right. So I'm not going to make it seem like it's not a big deal, but I just got to like fit it in here and there.
Yeah, it sounds a little like creating order out of chaos to me.
Right, I have
it's
to.
Just right. It's what you do. This is what you do. And I think about, we all say we're busy, and what an excuse when you look at those who manage to accomplish so much more. I think, as you said, you realize that you have more agency over your time. That is something I want to like post. That is such a poignant comment, because if not you, then who? Right. And that gives you confidence when you know that you're setting your time, and you can say no, or you can say yes, but it's not that kind of maybe gray area that stresses everyone out. I have a question. I have another question. It's the thing that is so, let me go there first. Which planner are you using is the question.
Mossery, Mossery.
Okay, they're gonna realize a lot of sales after this call.
Yeah, so, I think it comes from like Malaysia. I don't know if it's just because of all the craziness with the supply chains, but like it literally like came from Malaysia. But it works really well. It's nice. I like it a lot.
Just take a look at that. So here's my question. Going back to the military, I mean, when you use the word command, it just, it sort of made me remember my DoD clients and how I started talking like them after being around them for, a few years, command and, military time and all of that. How has that shaped your life? And
Sure.
Follow question, do you recommend it as the military as a pathway for women?
Sure. Okay, so the two things that I think I probably draw on most, or maybe it just most shaped me from my military experience, I would say the concept of responsibility and the concept of accountability. And I kind of always joke that so the Naval Academy is positioned between the Severn River and the town of Annapolis, and there's like a wall that cuts off the academy from the town, and then the other side is a seawall in the river. And so there was this concept of jumping the wall. So after lights out, shimmy over the wall, go to DC, go out in town, go drink, go hang out wherever, whatever. I was such a goody-goody. I just never did that because I just wasn't interested in getting in trouble. So I just was like, I'm just not going to do it. But a lot of people would jump the wall. And I would always say, like, if you're going to jump the wall, like, you better have fun. Like, go to DC, like, make it a big night, because if you get caught, and you probably will, you're going to have these demerits, and you're going to have to run tours, and you're not going to be able to have liberty for a really long time. So this whole idea of like, you're going to take responsibility for what you did, and you're going to be held accountable for it. Like, that's literally something I learned at like 17 when I showed up.
Wow.
And so for me, there isn't ever a situation where, and I see people do it, but there isn't a situation where I'm not going to fess up, that I'm not going to be like, okay, the buck stopped with me. Like that's, and I actually would prefer it. I would prefer it to just be clear like that. Like, I don't want it mealy and uncertain. Like if I did a good job, like I want everyone to acknowledge that. And if I screwed up, let's acknowledge that, so that we can just like then do the next thing.
Yes.
Right. And so that's kind of, that's how I think those are the big things that I got out of the military. And then your next question was,
thank you for that, by the way. Do you recommend the military as a path for women?
Yeah. So listen, I do. I think there is a lot to learn in the military, and there's a lot that's actually quite equalizing in the military, right? Like literally you open up the military newspaper and everyone's pay is the same, and you know what everyone else is making. Like that's just the way it works. So there are certain things that are just non-negotiable. Now, but I'm not naive, right? And there's been a lot of really bad press when it comes to women, and there's been a lot of really irresponsible and negligent and criminal leadership, quite honestly, that's gone on to allow some really horrific things that have happened in the military. So, unfortunately, even though those of us who were in the military knew and understood that we were actually at a higher standard, like it's not okay to say like, well, these things exist in society, so they're going to exist in the military. Like, I get that, but that's not why your sense of purpose drove you to the military. Wasn't to just do things like that. So I know those things exist. They exist in the real world, but I will say that there is a framework and an order to it, and an ability to, just like in the real world, there's going to be challenges with the way that things are meted out, but there is really a leveling that I think can happen in the military. That's actually a beneficial experience. Like I wouldn't undo my experience, and maybe that's the easiest way to explain it.
No, that's such a strong answer, and all I can say is I've been around women who have a military background, and what comes through is what you've said in terms of, the responsibility, accountability, strength. It's uber cool, So let me, here's the last question, I think, just given the time that we have. So this is from Diane Silverman. It's a great question, Diane. So Quorum focuses on advancing women by taking action for ourselves, for each other, and for the broader community in order to create the change that we want to see. What other actions for impact are you most focused on at the moment? And what do you recommend for all of us at Quorum to consider?
Yeah, so great question. So tying back to a question that was asked before about like, how do you get involved in sort of entrepreneurial endeavors? I would say that I have found just talking it up, just sort of saying out loud that this is what I'm interested in to people in my network, and even people peripherally on my network, I guess, but mostly people that you trust that are closer. You'd be surprised. It actually starts to, something will come back at you. I do think that there is a bit of a boomeranging effect when we put it out there very specifically. So, but there are, of course, all sorts of organizations and all that kind of stuff. But I would say the things that I've done entrepreneurially have been a bit more organic. And that's what I would say as far as impact, right? That's why kind of talking about the idea of doing something entrepreneurial, something where you can kind of be on the ground floor, where your voice gets heard, sort of not diluted, could be something that's really interesting for the community of women. I mean, I also chair the board of the Mission Continues, and so for me, veterans issues are very important. Female veterans, we actually over-index on the Mission Continues, the number of women that join our Veteran Service Organization, our VSO, than other organizations. So I do think that there is something about how we've crafted it, how we've created space for women, for female veterans, how we really see them, how we give them the opportunity to really use that purpose and redirect it. That really is resonating with women, which I really love. So that's something that I'm spending a lot more time. I mean, I'm the chair of the board, so I kind of have to do more than I had before. But I do think that there are probably lots of these types of passions that have probably arisen even out of the last year, and things that you may not have known that you felt so strongly about, and things that maybe you did feel strongly about, but there wasn't really an understanding of an avenue of connecting with other people who felt the way that you did, right? Because maybe the language or the topic wasn't as public as it was before, you know, as it is now. And so I do think that we probably have a little something. And it could be an issue that we've all been struggling with forever, right? Like you want to start, you know, mentoring more junior women or whatever it happens to be that you feel is most impactful. I think now is probably as good a time as any, even though we're overwhelmed and we've got so much going on and we've got all of our own challenges, and we're probably taking care of people that we weren't taking care of before, and you know, dealing with our own challenges. But I do think that we probably have an opportunity coming out of the other side of this to use all that is sort of the output of all of that challenging stuff to be able to pour into other people. But it is also important, of course, not to drain yourself. But I do think that you probably have like a special nugget of wisdom that you wouldn't have had, where that impact can actually be really felt. And you probably now could be joining organizations or pouring into people that are more ready and in a different headspace and place to hear what you have to say than they might have been before all of this. Right. So I don't have a specific organization. I mean, you can always come out and volunteer with the Mission Continues. Just go to our website, missioncontinues.org. Hopefully we're doing a service project in a town near you. But I do think there's probably a lot of passion that you have that you could probably channel.
Love that. Love that answer. Love the question as well. So inspiring, you know, on so many different fronts. So I'm going to open it up. We have 2 more minutes for if the audience has a question, and if not, then I'm going to turn it to Meg and or Diane, or both. It's got to be one question, or maybe you're in awe. Maybe that's.
No, I talk a lot. There could be no questions.
All right.
I'm gonna grab the floor if that's okay. Everybody, it's so nice to see all these fantastic faces. Lynn, thanks so much for such great moderation today. Questions were amazing, and Nana, it was a very special conversation. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us. I learned a ton. I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I thought I would just reflect on a few things that came up for me that maybe came up for you as well. I was really fascinated about this entrepreneurial project that you're working on, related to this need for all of us to continuously learn and better understand each other. There's something really fascinating about all of that in my mind, and in that process find shared empathy, which I loved that as your comment as to the outcome and the goal that you wanted for diversity pop. Nana had called me, I don't know, a month or so ago. I can't, time melds together in the pandemic, but anyway, and said, I'm working on this thing and I'm not sure I've given you an update and I need to give you an update. And I was like, oh yeah, fab, you know, let's do it. And what fascinated me was how democratic it is, you know, the notion of it's for you as an individual as much as you want it. An organization can use it to create a different environment or inspire conversation or inspire better understanding amongst various populations within an organization, that kind of thing. So there's so much about it, and it seems so available, you know, that I thought was so amazing. So I wanted to learn more, and I hope many of you did too, or this was useful in that sense. I also want to repeat something that Lynn said, which was this notion of that Nana, that you shared with us about understanding and practicing our own agency around our own time. It was such a beautifully articulated concept. So thank you for that. That was a huge nugget in my mind. And you know, I believe it's actually true, because there isn't a soul on this call that isn't like way over busy, you know. So it all comes down to, you know, how do you make space and time for the things that you care about? And so what does that mean? And then how do you connect with others who care about something similar? So there's something very fascinating about all of that. Probably also one of the cores to quorum. So isn't that fascinating, you know, about how that all sort of connects, how we all care about the advancement of women. So I think that's really fascinating. So thank you for that nugget. That was really amazing in my mind. There were so many more that I don't even know what else to say, but I'm going to leave it with that. And I'm going to just say a few things about quorum, if you don't mind. But before I do that, I wish we were all together and we could do like a big, huge, we can do an applause anyway, right? For such a great moment, right? Thank you, Lynn and Nana, so much for, you know, Nana, for sharing so much of yourself, and Lynn for drawing that out. So there you go, you know.
Diane and Lynn were phenomenal to work
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
They were great.
we're very
So
lucky
honored.
to know them. So the couple quick things I wanted to mention, and then we'll wrap because everybody's so busy. We'll try and wrap right on time. The first thing I wanted to mention is we have all kinds of amazing content coming up at Quorum, and so I wanted to just ask you all to pay attention, not to miss out on things that you would find most useful and interesting. We've just got incredible opportunities to meet some amazing women, to also get into smaller, what we're calling cohort sessions of members, where we get an opportunity to really share and connect with each other, get to know each other a little bit better. And I wanted to draw your attention to June 3rd and 4th, which is actually going to be, we're going to do our big annual forum virtually. And it takes place in the afternoon on the 3rd, in the morning on the 4th. And so there'll be information coming soon about that. We've got some incredible speakers that are going to come spend some time with us. And what How is really known for, just like these sessions, is our ability to get down into smaller groups and interact and interface and exchange. And we will be doing that in the forum as well. It's one of the highlights, everybody's ability to meet and intimately interact with others. So stay tuned for more about that, but get that on your calendar. I also didn't want to end the session without a couple calls to action, because that's what we're all about at Quorum. So my couple calls to action, I thought, was one, I sort of challenge us all to check out diversitypop. I have to say, I don't see a single downside for a soul on this call. Do you? So right? So there's the big sales plug, Nana. But I don't mean it as a sales plug, because I actually think not only might we find it useful for ourselves, you know, all of us have so much impact and influence in the marketplace more broadly, whether it's our own organizations or other people who we think might find it interesting. So I'd like to challenge us to check it out and put the word out if you find it useful. So that would be the first action off of tonight, today. The second is a reflection call to action, which is more of a reflection, and that's really around how you're spending time. Nana did this beautiful job of talking about how you make time for the things that matter to you, and how you ensure, and particularly now in this crazy world that we all live in, how we make time for our passions and what we care about. So I would challenge us all to really do a little reflecting on that over the month ahead. And I think I'm going to leave it at that, because the last call to action I would say is please look forward to having you all join the upcoming sessions. So please make some time and space for that, because I think you'll enjoy it. And I think it's a wrap with that, ladies, today. So great to see everybody. I miss you all. Nana and Lynn, thank you so much. Everybody be well. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, be well.
Take care.
Bye.